Hello, everyone. It has been 17 months now, and the story about the cancellation of Song of Sparklemuffin hasn't been told. It is accurate to say that a story about it has been told, but not the full story. The real story is a lot more complex, but there are also things that go outside of that particular story's boundaries. Disturbing things that deal with real ethical concerns about someone occupying a place of authority in the mental health sphere of social media and the effects her behavior has on the most vulnerable among us. The story of the game is tied in a way to that larger story, so it's a good place to start because that's how it all started for me and for my husband. But before I go into the evidence, I need to talk about accountability. I was one of the project leads for Song of Sparklemuffin, but I was never given the chance to speak directly to the backers after the cancellation, even though my work and skill were part of how the project was presented to them. For 17 months, Liana Kerzner has controlled the public story and cut me off from the space where I might have given my side and been heard. For 17 months, I have waited for a balanced account. It never came, so I am giving mine here, in my own space. I am responsible for the significant 5-month delay that occurred when I received notice that the company I was with was going to close for good at the end of August. I worked very little on the project during unemployment, focusing on trying to find employment in a market that had been decimated by COVID. I then threw myself into seasonal work where I was working 12-hour days through holidays in the hope of acquiring a permanent position, and then when I secured a position and had to undergo a 2-month-long training, I wasn't doing a lot of work in the game. It doesn't matter to me how justified someone might think that was. It is an inescapable fact that my output slowed down and then stopped during that time period, and that is my responsibility. The second thing I take accountability for is the very poor management of my health. I was one of those cases that got pushed into hyperglycemia after COVID and landed full into diabetes that went undetected for a while due to not being employed and therefore no health insurance. When I went to the doctor due to strange symptoms, it was detected and my A1C was 13. Instead of figuring out what to do, I kind of froze. I spent weeks in avoidance, and the low energy, the brain fog, and the stress took a heavy toll on my focus and my productivity. Eventually, I got my stuff together without having to go on insulin, and my A1C is now at 5.5 with diet and moderate medication and exercise. But my mismanaged health was definitely a factor, and I take ownership for that. I also take responsibility for not bringing playtesters earlier. We would have detected bugs much sooner. There were bugs that escaped our very small tests that only emerged when a few other backers were tapped, and that threw us back for a couple of weeks. I also underestimated a good amount of the work that was very complex, like the character generator assets. Those took a lot longer than expected, and I ended up creating about 300 different assets so the volunteers could assemble the characters for the backers, which took a considerable amount of time. Several systems also were more complicated in execution than I originally anticipated, especially when dealing with the idiosyncrasies of the engine. I also take responsibility for my emotional regulation, which I'm going to go into now. As you know, Liana has exclusively blamed the delays on the emotional and mental health crisis of my husband Asher. That story is not correct, but I will address Liana's side of things later in this video. This is my section. My household was under strain. Asher and I were struggling. There was yelling. His depression was severe. He felt increasingly invisible, disregarded, blocked from succeeding, and I did not know how to help him. And I really handled that badly. I became overwhelmed. I communicated very poorly and sometimes barely communicated at all. Liana and I would vent to each other about our marriages, and those conversations often became despair spirals instead of becoming anything productive. And I will talk about that later. Liana did not force me to take her advice. I followed it, and that was my bad judgment, because the advice and the model that I started approaching conflict with resembled the way that Liana Kerzner handles conflict herself. I treated Asher's anger as a personal affront. I became indignant, and I treated criticism as a mortal offense. I confused setting boundaries with controlling or modifying someone's behavior, which is something I've seen Liana do. And that made both of us more reactive. Our arguments just got worse. Asher didn't feel like I was listening to him. He didn't feel acknowledged, and that only worsened the rift between us. A good friend eventually pulled me aside, actually, only a few days before Asher approached Liana to apologize. And he urged me to rethink on how I was handling the conflict. His exact words were, "Why are you letting this squirrely woman tell you how to approach your husband? Shouldn't your husband be telling you that?" So I stopped following the advice and behavior that Liana had modeled, and my relationship slowly started to improve. The ragers, as Liana has put them, eventually stopped. We still argue, just like any married couple, and I still sometimes feel those old reflexes come back, but I can recognize them more often now as a desire for control in the face of uncertainty. I allowed my relationship problems to affect my work. I let stress damage my focus. I adopted bad conflict models and made my marriage worse for a while. But that's not the same thing as saying that Asher caused the project to fail, any more than, say, Liana's husband Stephen caused the project to fail. But more on that later. A good part of accountability is being able to own your own reactions. What I do not accept is Liana centering my household as the public explanation for the project's delays and failure while leaving out the parts of the record that complicate her own role in it. For 17 months, Liana Kerzner has built a public story around the cancellation of Song of Sparklemuffin, my husband's character, and my professional reputation. She has read or alluded to anonymous messages on her radio show, Patreon, YouTube, and Discord server, then suggested or stated to her audience that we were responsible for those messages without any proof. For 17 months, she has described us as stalkers, deranged, unhinged, sad, pathetic, misogynists, friendless, talentless, transphobes, and desperate, while continuing to comment about us to her server, Patreon, and YouTube. Her defense has often been that she did not name us, but not naming someone does not mean they're not identifiable. She has told her audience what our motivations are, what our emotional state is, what our beliefs are, and what our problem is. She has even claimed that she can look into our minds, while treating her own conduct, motivations, and emotions as beyond interpretation for anyone. Liana presents herself as a public figure. When a public figure makes false claims about private individuals, there are real consequences for the people targeted. Those people have the right to defend themselves with documented truth. That is what this video is, and what this video series will be about. This is not a demand that you trust me, but I'm asking you to look at the record. Defamation concerns false statements of fact that harm someone's reputation. Truth, or substantial truth, is a complete defense. I want to address a select number of statements that Kerzner has made that I can prove are lies with documentation. But these are not all the comments she has made. The material I am going to lay out here is documented, and there is much more of it available on a website for anyone who wants to examine it in full at their own time. There is a lot of documentation, because there have been a lot of false statements. That is why these videos exist, to condense part of a much larger body of work into digestible examples. And the first thing I will tell you is this: don't trust me. What I mean is, don't take this on faith. Look at the evidence. Judge for yourself. Don't take my word for it, and don't take Liana's word for it. Any claim needs to be tested against the record. To understand the claims that Liana has made, we need to establish the development timeline, and I have done that in detail on the website, year by year, with documentation, but there are a few things I need to point out here. In the first year, one of the major events is my decision to help one of our volunteers by creating an NPC character generator. That meant making roughly 300 assets of body parts, hairstyles, outfits, accessories, and more. Oh God. That was a very large task. As were the custom magic systems for Princess Sparklemuffin and Princess Sparklepony, the timeline contains details about the volunteers, and those details will matter because several of Liana's claims depend on how many volunteers there were and what they were actually doing. Year 2 is when I lost my job, which I have already discussed. Year 3 leads into the cancellation, which will be addressed in another video in this series. But the main thing to watch as the timeline moves forward, and as you do your own searching in the website, is the state of Liana's game scripts at each point. That matters directly to the first claim. Now, Liana has made many claims about my professional conduct and reliability to her server. I have selected 11 claims on the website as representative examples of the larger narrative at play. I have chosen a few of those, the more representative perhaps, for this video. Neither sample is truly exhaustive. There are many, many more things she has claimed, but I only have so much life. Before I go into those claims, I need to explain why I am including material from Liana's Patreon Discord. Kerzner may argue that this was private and this is a violation of privacy, but this was not an intimate conversation between close friends. This is a paid community accessible through Patreon for $1 with roughly 100 members, including patrons, backers, clients, gamers, developers, and other creatives. In other words, it was potential professional audiences. The claims made here are not idle gossip. They concern the production of the game, my professionalism, my husband's work ethic, my work ethic. And they were made to a community that included backers and clients and creators and people connected to the spaces where I publish. So, if false or misleading claims are made in that environment and then amplified outward as they usually are, I have to be able to show what was said, where it was said, who said it, who could see it, and why it matters. There is also the issue of identifiability. Liana has repeatedly suggested that she did not name me or Asher, even though she has used Asher's name, as seen in this screenshot. But not using a name is not enough if the person is still reasonably identifiable. And here, the context is very obvious. The cancellation video referenced one team member's spouse, and my Kickstarter bio named my spouse and our company. Within 24 hours, people online had identified us without us saying anything. Now, the context is very clear. Remember, Liana said that she had lost a team member that she could not do the game without. Now, look at the bios and tell me which person could she be talking about? Herself, the writer, or the person literally doing everything else? It's very easy by elimination. Kerzner's lawyer has also made the suggestion that she could be talking about a mysterious, unnamed volunteer. Yeah, I can imagine a volunteer going away like that would crush the project when the two people who can essentially do everything in the project are still on board. Give me a break, Mark Burry. Kerzner has claimed that Asher immediately jumped up and said, it's me, she's talking about me. But that's false. Asher made no public comment about the cancellation for 19 days after the cancellation video. And we have the data that proves that. We were identified because the context pointed to us. The same issue applies to monikers and pseudonyms. My professional name of Mary Jest is not disposable. I have used it for over 20 years. It is tied to my music, my DBA, registration, my artwork, and my collaborations. I will not abandon the name under which I have built my creative life because someone else is circulating false claims about it. Statements about professional competence and work ethic and contract behavior or refusal to communicate are not opinions. They can be proven true or false, and a Discord server with around 100 paid members is still a place of publication. There is also a pattern of vagueness being used as a shield. Liana uses enough ambiguity for plausible deniability, but she still leaves enough specificity for recognition. So, when she says she did not name someone, that's not sufficient. The real question is this: could a reasonable person identify the target? In this case, they could and they did. For example, on Twitter, as you can see here, we were identified. And also on that den of scum and villainy known as Kiwi Farms. And those were not the only two places or individuals. So, if claims were made about my professional conduct, my husband, and the development of this project in a paid-to-access server that functions as a semi-public professional audience, then those claims need to be examined in the same sphere where they had their effect, in public. The first claim I need to address is that the delays were unilateral. In the cancellation video, Liana initially connected the delays to a mental health crisis involving a team member's spouse. Very quickly, that framing shifted into something broader. that all of the delays themselves were essentially our fault, and specifically tied to Asher allegedly abusing me. As you can see this in this Discord screenshot, that became the narrative she used. Liana has reinforced it repeatedly by alluding to private details that were not meant for public consumption about my domestic life that she nevertheless shared several times to her server as early as January of 2025. She has also tried to explain her own writing delays by saying that she was buried in admin shit because she had to manage multiple people. Specifically, she refers to managing 3 additional artists because I supposedly could not or would not do the job. But that's not what happened. There were not 3 simultaneous contributors, there was only ever 1 volunteer at any one time. Jess was briefly involved before the Kickstarter had even finished. She was not brought on to work on NPCs. We didn't have the NPC data. The Kickstarter hadn't even finished. She worked on maps, or rather she worked on one map, the troll farm, and then she left. She left before NPC work had truly begun because she was in conflict with Kerzner. She called Liana Kerzner abusive. Jess is a person living with autism who depends on her mother, a special education teacher, a great deal. Liana fired Jess for showing her mother some of her chats with Kerzner, claiming Jess had broken NDA. Then we have Song, a Liana Ker's client, who traded Liana Ker's sessions for work and who was brought in to work on backer NPCs. Her struggles with the pixel art style is what inspired me to create the generator. Mara replaced Song. Mara was yet another Liana Ker's client receiving free sessions in exchange for volunteer work. Mara did produce several sprites, but her time on the project was also short-lived, with Kerzner claiming that she had ghosted her. So the picture of Liana being buried under constant management of multiple artists is not accurate. There was no ongoing art department requiring her constant supervision. There was also a long stretch where I was not producing much new material in year 2 because I was dealing with job loss, job search, season work, and then training. That period lasted roughly 4 to 5 months, so if Liana's writing delays were primarily caused by having to manage my output or other artists, that window should have given her time to catch up independently. But according to the archive document and the metadata and the timestamps, the combat demo script and vertical slice demo did not advance in any meaningful way during those windows. In fact, throughout the entire production history, Liana's scripts were the things that lagged behind the most. Liana has since taken those Google Docs down, but the document histories are preserved and included in the evidence of this video. They will also be available on the website. Now, she may object that these documents are her intellectual property, but once she has made claims about the state of the project, those documents become relevant evidence. So, I have already taken accountability for my delays, but the point is that Liana's writing bottlenecked several times, and it never truly caught up to where it needed to be. It remained unresolved whether I was actively producing material or not. Her slowdowns do not track cleanly to my output, the volunteers, or any admin burden, so the claim that the delays were unilateral doesn't match the record. I will go into detail of what she said were the sources of her delays later. The second claim is that Liana had to bring in Song and Mara because I allegedly complained that there was too much work to do and refused to handle the backer NPCs. In this Telegram chat from March 19, 2022, Liana approached me about bringing Song, her client, as a volunteer. This wasn't a response to me refusing work. It came during a conversation about the calendar and seasonal event system I was handling at the time. I wasn't complaining, and I had not complained. Liana is lying about the entire situation. But let me give you one irrefutable proof. The NPC generator. If I thought the backer NPCs of about 150 or so were simply too much work to do, I would not have built a custom character creation tool with more than 300 separate artistic assets, bodies, clothes, hair, accessories, tails, wings, and more. That tool exists specifically because I saw Song and later Mara struggling with the assembly. So, the story that I said it was too much work and forced Liana to find other artists, can only hold up if you ignore the date, the message threads, the actual tools I built, and pretty much just everything that actually happened. Then there is the related claim that I refused to communicate with the other artists, forcing Liana to act as a go-between and causing further delays. So, both Song and Mara were in the shared Telegram development chat with Liana and me. You can see that here. I kept notifications limited so I would not be constantly interrupted by chatter, but I made it clear that if someone mentioned or tagged me, I would be notified. I told Song and Mara that they could tag me at any time and they were fine with that. I later asked Song whether either of them had ever felt they could not talk to me. Song said no. I tried to reach out to Mara, but unfortunately she has disconnected her Telegram and I don't know where I can find her. Liana potentially could have found her, but then again, she did say that Mara ghosted her, so... But Liana was in those chats. She saw me train Song and Mara on the tools. She saw me respond when feedback was requested, and she saw the communications happening. So the image of me as this aloof, difficult, unreachable, or unwilling to collaborate diva doesn't match what actually happened. It's a manufactured image of me that she's trying to sell you for a very specific purpose. Claim 4 is that Liana paid me in advance for development work and that I did not do the work I agreed to do. So she repeated that claim as recently as April of 2026. The initial payment from the Kickstarter funds was about $1,800, which I reported on my taxes as is documented. The question is simple. What did I actually deliver? On the website, you will see a tally of the project deliverables: artwork, systems, music, sound, implementation, work, visual assets, animation, design tools, and more. When measured against ordinary industry rates, I was not overpaid. I was actually underpaid. And I'm fine with that. This was an indie project, so I understood that. But the claim that I was paid in advance and then failed to do the work doesn't match the record of what actually happened. The project remained unfinished because Liana canceled it, which is her prerogative, but cancellation is not the same as not delivering. There's also a weird side claim about audio editing that is difficult to understand. Liana suggests that I needed her technical help for opera audition materials, and that's just bizarre. For some background, I am a trained opera singer. The pupil of a woman who sang lead roles at the Metropolitan Opera, New York City Opera, Opera de Nice, Palacio de Bellas Artes, Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, Paris's Bastille, Frankfurt Opera, Stuttgart Opera, and others. I also have a background in multimedia technology. I routinely edit, mix, and prepare my own materials. In several of our music collaborations, I handled the mixing and pitch correction, including on tracks where Liana's vocals needed frequent correction because she kept going off pitch. So that claim doesn't make any sense. She did not do that work for me. I never needed her to do it. But claim 5 gets even more bizarre. Liana supposedly says that she did not know the combat demo script had changed. The implication is that I rewrote the demo, blindsided her, and that she stayed quiet only to avoid causing another delay. But here, on May 14, 2024, I proposed a temporary alternative scenario because the actual combat demo script that Liana was writing was still not finished. The first boss fight hadn't even been written. Liana agreed to my proposal. Her response was simple. It sounds good. There was also another witness to that exchange. The demo was not changed behind her back. She knew about the pivot and she approved it, and the reason for the pivot was very straightforward. By May 11th, 9 days before the deadline, Liana had added only 171 words to the demo script, which she hadn't touched since October. She had been urging us to get the demo out, but the script was not ready, so I created a stopgap scenario, a self-contained snowy mountain training sequence designed to show the combat system, gather feedback, and give the backer something complete to test. I wasn't going rogue. It was a practical compromise to keep the project moving. Now, of course, Liana has also characterized this as a love letter to a Second Life boyfriend. The character portrayed as the master was someone close to me whose father had recently passed away, and he was in a deep depression. And I thought it would be nice to include a gesture to have him there temporarily. He wasn't going to remain in the game because that entire scenario was going to be gone the moment Liana actually finished the intended script. She also mocked parts of the demo that she herself suggested, including the chunky monkey joke. That was her own joke. That's her sense of humor, not mine. There was also the claim that Princess Sparklemuffin was completely excluded from the demo. She was not removed from the project. She was planned for the second phase, and the screenshots show that. After feedback and polish, because her spell system and Princess Sparkle Pony's systems were more complex. I wanted players to first test the basic tactical movements and placement systems before introducing more elaborate character mechanics, such as Princess Sparklemuffin's very customizable spell system and Princess Sparkle Pony's both soul-eating mechanic and her dance revolution type combat. Liana knew I proposed the temporary scenario and she approved it, and she continued watching the demo's progress in the shared channel without saying a word. Now that we're gonna jump forward a bit to claim 7. You can look at the other claims, but I'm only choosing some of the representative ones and the more bizarre ones like this one. This claim is incredibly audacious. Liana claims that I burned through a surprising amount of money on plugins that supposedly did the same thing over and over again. The total I was able to estimate from the plugins was about $378. Not thousands, not some runaway spending spree, $378. And because I apparently enjoy pain, I listed every plugin on the website, what it was, what it did, and what it cost at the time of purchasing. Whee! So, more importantly, every single plugin's purchase was approved by Liana herself. I sent her the descriptions, I explained what each plugin would do for the game, and I sent her the official documentation so she could understand the features we were adding. Not a single one of those plugins was ever purchased without her say-so. So, if Liana now thinks all of those plugins did the same thing, then either she did not read the documentation, did not understand what she was reading, did not understand what she was approving, or she's pretending not to. But that is not my incompetence. It is hers. And yet the story that she wants you to believe is that I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on useless plugins that did nothing because it makes me look incompetent. But wait, it gets worse. Claim 8 is even weirder. She claims that she was excluded from development, speaking about Asher and me, saying that we paused development to consider making a pornographic game instead, and that we plan to continue without her after being paid in advance. What? This conflicts with her own lawyer's statement that Asher was not involved in development, and you'll see that in the legal section. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but Asher did have an erotic visual novel project. It was separate from Song of Sparklemuffin. He worked at it himself on his own while he was depressed. Song of Sparklemuffin was never paused and abandoned or redirected in favor of Asher's very visual novel. The major delays were tied to my job loss, my job search, my training, my health issues, not some secret pornographic coup. I never told Liana she was being cut off. I never told her the project would continue without her. It was her intellectual property. We did not want it. We don't want it now. So this claim appears designed to create a very specific impression that Asher somehow convinced me, seduced me to go rogue, abandon her, take the Song of Sparklemuffin away from her, and run off to make erotic visual novels off into the sunset. What? I mean, I don't even have relevant chat logs to show, because in all of the 80 or so pages of exported Telegram chat history, there's not a single instance of me giving Kerzner the pink slip and telling her, "Sparkle is ours, baby." It's a non-event. That doesn't even sound realistic, but her Discord audience not only believed the claims, but joined in on mocking us for it, which is, of course, the aim, I believe. Remember the whole thing about reputational damage?
Do you know what everyone says about you? They say that you're a homeschooled jungle freak who's a less hot version of me. Yeah.
So, claim 11. This is the big one. The general claim is that Liana paid me a couple $1,000 for work that was not done. She has repeated this narrative recently, and she has paired it with another implication that I was ungrateful because she also helped me financially during hardship, something she has even aired to her radio show in the episode Are You Accidentally an Asshole? It is not just about money, but this is directly attacking my character, our character. It presents us as someone who took from her, failed her, and then turned on her, which is a narrative she repeats quite often. Keep track of it. But the relationship was not one-sided. I did free work for Liana. I composed music, I did graphic design, I created concept art connected to projects involving her friends. I gave time, labor, and creative skill without treating it as every act as a debt to be weaponized later. By professional estimates, she estimated the work I did, for example, for her friend Derwin Mack's game proposal at least $1,200 pro bono. That's just one example. So when Liana presents herself as the generous benefactor and me as the ungrateful pauper dependent, she is giving a very curated story meant to leverage asymmetry. Liana has made a great deal out of money, obligation, and integrity. She has suggested that I was paid and did not deliver. She has suggested that I owe her. She has used that as a framing to shape how people see me. But there is something she did not tell the backers on the topic of integrity. In her video, Gaming's Integrity Problem, Liana spoke about the importance of being open with backers. She said that people who spend money on things prefer communication disclosure over being razzle-dazzled. She also said that people get angry at you for having integrity when you disclose bad behavior. So let's apply that standard. On February 2nd, 2022, in a private Telegram conversation, Liana informed me that her husband Stephen Joel Kerzner had taken $3,000 from the Kickstarter funds allocated to Song of Sparklemuffin. Stephen was not a team member and had no official role in the project. According to Liana's own response there, he had no right or authorization to access those funds. These were Kickstarter funds contributed by backers for a specific creative project. The people who backed Song of Sparklemuffin did so under the understanding that Liana Kerzner was responsible for the use of those funds, not Stephen. Liana later claimed that the money was replenished, but I cannot independently verify that because I have no access to the relevant financial accounts, and at this point I have shown you that she lies so frequently about events that it's hard to tell what is real and what isn't with Liana Kerzner. But one thing I can verify is this, that the incident was never publicly disclosed to backers by Liana, the fiduciary officer and project runner. Liana herself has publicly argued that integrity requires disclosure when something affects a project and its backers. It is the excuse she used to terminate the game because my husband got into a nothing burger Twitter fight that she turned into a moral crusade. My household was made part of a public explanation for the project's delays and failures. My husband was turned into a central figure, a scapegoat in that explanation. His mental health, our marriage, and a private argument were all folded into the story that she told the public. But when her own husband accessed $3,000 in project funds despite having no official role or authorization, there was no disclosure at all. And that is the asymmetry of Liana Kerzner. And then, when we objected to that version of events, when we pushed back against a story that placed the moral weight of the project's failure on our household while omitting this entirely, we were characterized as stalkers, unstable, obsessive, dangerous. But paying attention to public claims about your own reputation is not stalking. Being sent information from public paid-to-access publication spaces that show someone actively defaming your reputation and raising objection to it is not stalking. Correcting a record that has been used to damage your name is not obsession. Refusing to let someone turn your family into the convenient public scapegoat is not harassment, it is self-defense. If private conflict could be made public because it supposedly affects the public's perception of the project, then a $3,000 incident involving Kickstarter funds is even more relevant. Only one of those stories has been told, and it was the one that made us look like the problem, and every narrative has been weaponized since then to continue to paint our objections as proof of our guilt. She claims we are angry that we made a mistake, that we are angry that she canceled the project, that we're angry that she won't talk to us, that we want her attention. No, we have stated what we want multiple times, and she keeps rewriting what we say to fit into the narrative that paints us as deranged. And it is the clearest example in this first video of the larger pattern in this series that will be explained. Selective disclosure and outrage and selective standards, all used to protect one person's public image while damaging everyone else's. I remember when I claimed accountability for my side of the delays, and I have shown that Liana's own story about her delays don't add up. What Liana doesn't tell you is that we were close friends for 6 years, and during that time, we talked about our marriages. She talked about Stephen, I talked to her about Asher. In moments of terrible lack of boundaries on both our ends, we shared recordings of our husbands. At the time, Liana described her marriage as deeply unhappy and dysfunctional. She repeatedly connected her lack of writing progress to instability in her own household. Conflicts with Stephen, emotional depletion, threats of self-harm from him, neglected animals, domestic responsibilities falling apart, yelling, confrontations, and financial issues, all of which she blamed on Stephen. Both of us vented at times about even leaving, but Venting under pressure is not the same thing as making a serious decision to leave. As I said earlier, I do not accept Liana centering my household as the only public explanation for the project's failure, while leaving out that she was giving similar explanations about her own household for her own missed writing obligations. And I must go into detail on those because of the amount of detail that she has gone into mine. And during development, I checked in with her about the writing. I even obtained an ink integration plugin so that the engine could be worked with narrative scripting systems that would make dialogue implementation easier. It was not especially complicated, but very little material was produced in that format by her. And at least once Liana attributed to conflicts with Stephen, she said that stress had caused her to forget how to write in the format. At other times, she said that she was too emotionally depleted to write because of domestic crisis involving Stephen, including threats of self-harm from him. I also received recordings, just as I gave Liana recordings. These were not explanations invented later. These were explanations that she gave to me at the time for why the writing was not progressing. And that deserves to be mentioned because my domestic situation was scapegoated as part of the explanation for the project collapsing while hers was not. My household was presented as causality central. When I started challenging Liana's narrative, she accused me of blaming a woman for dealing with abuse and immediately reached for misogyny. When I said that these manipulations were in order to serve her public image, she twisted that into a claim that I was attacking her looks and therefore was using a misogynistic canard. That is what she does. Deliberate misrepresentations, suggestions of hostility, and accusations that make people afraid to answer back because they risk being branded stalkers, misogynists, transphobes, gingerphobes, or even suspected of criminal behavior. And yes, Liana Kerzner has lied. I have credible evidence that my Blue Sky account was suspended because I started revealing the information you are seeing here. In the next video, I will show you why I say that, and with even more lies exposed. After the account was taken down, she told her Patreon backers on April 23rd that I responded with a blinding rage, that I was scary, and that she felt afraid.
I don't care if it's women, I don't care if it's men. I will say, yeah, guys, this is bullshit, what you're doing. But this whole, I'm afraid of what? Shitty comments on the internet? You're gonna have to do better than that. Please don't. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Her audience could no longer see what I actually said. So once again, her word is the only authoritative account. Unfortunately for her, I downloaded my car file. When I publish it, people will see my words. They will not find blinding rage. They will find someone fed up after 17 months of lies, false stories, and reputational damage. And also, I was mocking her. Just as she claims to embody the Harlequin archetype, I went full Cheshire Cat and mocked her. It is very telling that only 2 accounts that have ever mocked Liana Kerzner effectively have been suspended, while the other alleged stalker accounts still remain. That's something we'll examine with some interesting evidence, because there is a lot about these other accounts, allegedly, according to Liana, controlled by Emily Schooley, to give you pause and make you question some things. Asher and I were branded as stalkers for paying attention to public and semi-public claims about us, and for noticing the game of needling and insinuation that she plays throughout her media, using indexical targeting to brand people and then crying abuse and harassment when they respond. That is an abuser's toolkit, the work of the cry-bully. Liana has tried legal threats. It is not defamation if what I say is true. Now she appears to be pivoting into presenting herself as the endangered female and afraid of us. Afraid of what? We pose no threat to Liana Kerzner. We have no intention of harming her, and we take serious exception to any insinuation that we're criminally dangerous. We will not tolerate being branded stalkers anymore. What I have shown in this episode is why we have a reason to pay attention. When a public figure repeatedly damages your reputation with false claims, watching the narrative and correcting the record is not stalking. It is self-defense. And this pattern is not unique to us. We're going to look at Liana Kerzner in conflict and the conflicts she has lied about for years with evidence, such as how there is credible evidence to believe she may have verbally abused a woman at a conference and then tried to gaslight her into thinking the event couldn't have happened because she had laryngitis right before singing a 16-minute musical number in front of a crowded audience with no amplification, or when she threatened to sue 2 beloved legends of game development history because the brother of that woman started speaking up about what he saw as the abuse to his sister, and Kerzner tried to frame his approach as misogyny instead. Or when Kerzner betrayed the confidentiality of her Liana Care's clients multiple times, revealing medical history details and mental health and family history to friends and her Discord server, up to and including mocking her ex-clients to them and alluding that past trauma was fraud. Or how Liana and Stephen Joel Kerzner wield the threat of Canada's unjust defamation laws to silence critics who become too vocal, too inconvenient, and have too much evidence, because these people believe that they can't afford a protracted, lengthy legal battle against Kerzner's famous lawyer, Mark Burry, who is all too happy to act the intimidating bully for them. That and more in the next episodes of 17 Months of Liana Kerzner.